recording it. I'll be recording it for them, and I can also send it out to everybody in the email list. Cool. So we'll give another 30 more seconds and then we can get started. 30 more seconds, but yeah, hope everyone's having a good Thursday. I'm currently in San Francisco, and it's actually sunny for once here. It's not super foggy, so it's nice. Makes me want to go outside. Cool. A few more seconds and then we can get started. Cool. I see some people trickling in still. All right, I think we can properly get started now. By the way, as an FYI for the people coming in, this call is recorded, so I'll share it out to people who are here but also couldn't make it. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. Cool. So, hopefully everyone's here is at the right webinar, but it's essentially, talking about how we reduced customer support tickets by about 50% with ChatGPT. So first off, thank you for clicking on the clickbait. We do actually help people reduce tickets, some even up to 80%. But the big thing to call out here is a lot of people here might be familiar with ChatGPT, like the website that you go to ask questions and things. We use OpenAI's APIs, so we're kind of like ChatGPT, but a little bit more on the back end. But always got to put the clickbait for everyone to click on. At a high level today, I'll be talking about our product. Got to shill our product a little bit, and then we'll really get into the meat and bones of talking about some of the more technical details, how we combat a lot of the CS hallucinations, things like that. Cool. So a little bit about me first. I'm Michael, co-founder here at Spryngtime. Some personal background: used to be a software engineer at Zillow for a few years, and then went over to the dark side of Facebook and product management. Worked on augmented reality and Instagram and a lot of fun stuff, and then decided to quit and kind of build something on my own, and went through Y Combinator, raised some seed funding, and now we're kind of off to the races and building. Also, by the way, if you guys have questions, feel free to just type them in the chat, or even unmute yourself and ask questions as we go along. I'll also make time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to interject with questions or type. Cool. So kind of kicking it off, the problem, your customers probably ask the same questions over and over again, and you're hiring, or you're probably doing it yourself to answer the same questions over and over again. Also, I ran into this problem myself. I started a previous company where we did payment processing, and it was a kind of a B2C type of product, and we had questions who these customers would just never read the help docs. We would have to answer the same questions over and over again. We would put them in the FAQs. They would just never read it. And I spent a lot of my time doing this also. Spent a good 10 to 20% of my time, answering questions, interacting with customers. And we actually because we had this problem, we actually built the MVP for ourselves. I just spent a week playing around with ChatGPT, playing around with what OpenAI has released, and out of the box, this could kind of answer 20% of our questions with just a week's worth of work. So, I ran into this problem myself, and I decided to just try to build something to solve it. And ChatGPT worked pretty well out of the box, right? And something that we realize is for a lot of companies, at least 20%, if not 25% of a lot of these questions could be answered if people have just read the help docs, right? And I think an unfortunate truth of both customer support and kind of any customer facing thing is people just don't read docs, right? I even admit that, I will not read a user manual when I get a new tech product, and I'll just start playing around with it, right? And I think it's just a reality that a lot of people don't want to sift through and look through and search through help docs to find the right answer, especially if your help docs are really large, right? And so kind of the solution, ChatGPT, that can kind of understand your, the question that a customer is asking, your product, it really understands like what you guys are building, what are the use cases and any of the help docs that you might have. And so, that's essentially Spryngtime, right? That's what we're building, ChatGPT for customer support. And so here's a quick demo of our product. It's 1 minute, super quick. Hello, I'm Michael, co-founder at Spryngtime. We build ChatGPT for customer support, and this is a quick demo of Spryngtime. Can you guys hear this, by the way? I don't know if you guys can hear this. Let me. Oh, you guys can hear this. Cool.
Yes.
You got it. Hello, I'm Michael, co-founder at Spryngtime. We build ChatGPT for customer support, and this is a quick demo of Spryngtime trained on Airbnb's docs, their help docs. So if a customer asks, does Airbnb collect tax for me? Our bot will go really try to understand the question, look into Airbnb's documentation, and really try to give a response to the customer. So, it says, yes, in certain jurisdictions, Airbnb facilitates, the collection of taxes. I can now ask, if a guest cancels their reservation, do I still have to pay taxes, right? So it's kind of a complex question. It's kind of like two things, canceling a reservation and paying taxes. And our bot can properly understand that question, can properly go grab and search for the right information in the help docs. And so, if a guest cancels a reservation, the amount paid to you is determined by the cancellation policy. If you don't receive any payment, you won't have to pay taxes. So it can properly understand that, hey, I'm a host and I'm asking about both what happens for a canceled reservation with taxes. So cool. Hopefully a good high level overview of what our product can do. Hello, I'm Mike. Cool. So at a high level, we kind of offer three main products. The first is, being able to answer what we call knowledge questions. So kind of what you just saw, the answer is probably sitting in your help docs. It's probably just how do I do this? Does your product offer this? Do I have to do something, right? Do you have feature X, Y, Z, right? And that's probably in your, FAQ doc somewhere on your website, and we can properly answer those knowledge questions, right? Pretty basic stuff. Nothing super complicated there. I think the second big product that we're actually super excited for is something called tasks. And I'll touch more on this later, especially with some of the challenges, but at a high level, tasks are where you need to go grab outside information, right? So there's probably a lot of customer support questions that, aren't answered in the help docs. So for example, in an e-commerce situation, a customer might ask, where's my order? Obviously, the answer to Bob's order, who maybe lives in, Nebraska, might be different than Alice's order, who maybe lives in, Alaska, right? Maybe it takes 5 days for Alice and 2 days for Bob. And so in this case, what Spryngtime can do is it can create a task to go talk to, let's say, Shopify. It can grab shipping details, and then it can create another task to talk to UPS to be like, oh, your order will be arriving in 2 days, right? So it's very like customer specific, conversations, being able to grab customer specific information, being able to update things. So if someone's like, hey, can you add this person onto my team, right? And, you can add someone onto a Shopify team. So being able to not only answer knowledge questions, but being able to do tasks. And then last but not least, kind of auto documenter. We've noticed a lot of our customers love this product, but essentially, if someone asks a new question in intercom and then you respond to it, we'll help you generate FAQs that you can then copy and paste into help docs, or that you can, use to train the bot later. Someone mentioned very interested in the tech stack behind tasks. Yes, I'll touch on that in a bit. But yes, so, you never have to answer the question twice. You can essentially auto document, auto create FAQs from past intercom, conversations or customer support conversations. Something else that's kind of cool is we work with a lot of, companies that use Slack. They talk about a new product launch, let's say. You can easily install our Slack bot, and we can also help create product FAQs directly from a Slack conversation, right? So if you guys are talking about, the product details, like, hey, does a product do X, Y, Z? Yes, it does. Cool. We can help turn those into FAQs that you can then copy and paste and also use to train our bot. Cool. So I'll pause there. Any high level questions about like Spryngtime and our product or anything? Otherwise, I can dive into the meat and bones, which I'm sure is all what you all came for. Some of the challenges and some of the more interesting stuff that we ran into.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
So you mentioned intercom. Does Spryngtime only work with intercom? Are there other options? Is it an API?
Yeah, good question.
Capabilities there?
Yeah, I forgot to mention. So we integrate with Intercom, Zendesk, Discord, Slack, email, almost every kind of major customer support ticketing platform or customer support communication platform we integrate well with, right? So we don't offer an API today, so we don't really have a developer-facing product, but that's something that if you're interested, we can chat more about. We've actually gotten asked that a few times, so maybe that's something that we can chat about. But yes, it's we don't aim to replace Intercom. We don't aim to replace, Zendesk or any other chat functionality or any ticketing functionality. We're more just, plugging into your existing, CS stack. So hopefully that answers the question.
But you mentioned email. Does that mean that this automation can work via email and auto send emails to customers?
Yep, exactly. So, for example, we have some customers who just use Gmail for customer support. We can use Google OAuth, connect our account to, your Google account, and we can auto respond via email. We also work with a lot of companies that funnel their email into, let's say, Zendesk. We can also auto respond via email, via Zendesk too. But the short answer is yes, we can auto respond via email also.
What about Salesforce?
That's a good question. So we don't integrate yet with Salesforce. Most of our companies actually use HubSpot. So we have a HubSpot integration, but Salesforce is something that's on our roadmap. We can chat more about that. We don't have it live today.
Got you. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Cool. Feel free to, again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. Cool. But so now kind of the meat and bones, like, can I really trust AI? We actually get this question a lot. A lot of, CS execs are like, hey, like AI seems super interesting, but, there's hallucination problems. I don't know if I can trust it to actually give a good experience, right? And this is something that we've been working obviously months on. And, we have a very good lay of the land. And here's a good example of, Google's AI chatbot, Bard. If you haven't heard about it, it's very similar to ChatGPT. But, they made this like public launch and, they hallucinated, right? They made a factual error in a very public demo and people called them out on that, right? And you've probably also seen ChatGPT just like make stuff up or has, just spewed random information that isn't necessarily relevant, right? And so I think this scares a lot of people, right? And rightfully so, right? Like, especially if you're in customer support or in research or whatever, like you kind of want good answers. You kind of want your customer to not get bad answers or made up answers or hallucinated answers. So I think this is a very relevant question, not just in customer support, but also generally in any sort of information type of role. So for us, like we've definitely noticed this also. Some of our biggest challenges have been hallucinations, accuracy and confidence, and then tasks. Tasks is like super, super powerful, but just really hard to get right, especially with all the, services that we integrate with. And I think someone asked about that, so we'll definitely touch on that in a bit. Cool. So let's talk about hallucinations first. So, this is a good example, a good visualization of what I like to think of hallucinations. It's like a robot that can actually get pretty far, like 90% of the way there, and it like hallucinates where the ball is, doesn't exactly know where it is, and like, misses it by just an inch, right? And so I think this is a really good visual. It's also just a great GIF in general. It's a good state of the world in terms of where AI and robots are. So again, first off, what are hallucinations? So hallucinations are generally when ChatGPT or another AI product confidently tries to respond, and it seems like good information on the surface, but when you actually dive into it, it's either wrong or incorrect or just completely made up information, right? So here's a good example. I want to get an email or something, some type of notification when someone completes my type form, right? So if you don't know what type form is, it's kind of like a survey product. You can, create surveys, and then, in this case, I wanted to get an email when someone completes my type form. How can I do that? ChatGPT gives a pretty confident, it seems like it's kind of right? The real step here to highlight is number 3. You try to click on connect from the top menu, and then you should be able to find a bunch of stuff, right? Seems kind of right. And then when I actually try to follow it and click on this, connect tab up here, there's nothing about email. This connect tab is just about how do I connect to Google Sheets or Google Analytics or any other integrations, right? And so very clearly, ChatGPT in this instance just gave me wrong information. And how we found this out is we're actually working with Typeform as like a customer, right? And, we ran into this question and it just gave bad information. And we actually found this out. So what happened was ChatGPT in 2021 had indexed a bunch of websites, including Typeform, including their help docs, right? And so these are actually help docs from Typeform from 2021. The problem is, obviously Typeform's product has changed very dramatically since 2021. These are now wrong help docs. They've since changed their help docs. And so, this information is like very wrong, right? And so this is a good example of hallucination. And I see some questions in here. Is this from GPT-3 or GPT-4? So this is actually from GPT-4. So you can see this purple symbol generally means GPT-4. We almost exclusively use GPT-4 for almost everything. GPT-3 is decent, but it's really bad at reasoning through questions. So we almost exclusively use GPT-4. But good question. Yes, I would generally recommend also using GPT-4, unless you're, looking to write a song or something. GPT-3 is decent for that. But if you need correctness, if you need, to really understand things, GPT-4 is great for that. Someone asked, I asked one AI to provide references for the statistics it mentioned. It generated valid URLs that went nowhere. So yes, this one is actually super interesting. We've actually seen this too. This was actually a problem, very admittedly, this was a problem with Spryngtime way back in the day when we first launched. We would say, hey, you can find more information here with this URL, and it would just make up a URL. We actually found that GPT-4, and I'll talk more about some of the techniques that we use, but using GPT-4 with some good guardrails actually helped a lot. So our bot now essentially never makes up any invalid URLs. But yeah, this one's actually super interesting, and we've seen this, in production before with bad or invalid URLs. So good call out there. But yeah, keep the questions coming. But yeah, so these are hallucinations. We worked with, Typeform and a bunch of other companies, but kind of like a little trick here. If you have like a big public company that existed before 2021 and you had some help docs there, like Typeform, you're probably going to get some hallucinations there, right? And so now the question then becomes for us, like, what do we do? How do we fix this? Obviously this is like a huge problem. We're giving, bad answers to, customer support. How do we fix this? The most obvious thing that we thought of was tell ChatGPT, hey, only give real answers. Don't try to make stuff up. If you're not confident, don't respond, right? Don't hallucinate, right? Kind of telling ChatGPT, don't be bad. Obviously that did not work super well. In this case, I as an example, I was like, give only real answers. Do not make anything up. Like if you are not confident, do not respond, right? It still responded with the same exact answer, same exact, bad, hey, go to this connect tab, which, very clearly does not solve my problem with Typeform. So yeah, so this is kind of like, telling a toddler, hey, don't do bad things. It'll still do bad things. So then we started trying something called prompt engineering. And for lack of a better word, this is kind of like throwing prompts at the wall until one works. It's really trying to give it guardrails, trying to give it more instructions, trying to give it very detailed information, right? And that's essentially what prompt engineering is. For a while, we were literally just throwing prompts at the wall, trying a bunch of stuff. And this was, I would say this is pretty high leverage if you guys are just starting out with prompts and ChatGPT. This is a very great example again of hallucination. You guys should try this out actually on ChatGPT. If you just type reverse the word lollipop, very simple, a fifth grader could probably do this, right? And ChatGPT very confidently responds, the reverse of the word lollipop is, this bad reverse thing, right? I won't get into, this is actually like a pretty famous example. I won't get too much into the technical details of why, but this is a really good example of a hallucination, right? This is very common. You can reproduce this today in ChatGPT. It hasn't been solved, right? And so with prompt engineering, right, I can give it some more guardrails. I can give it some more instructions, right? And so, I'm like, hey, you're a very advanced word reverser. You will follow these specific instructions. Take the word input and reverse it. Double check your work. If the word is not reversed, then say error, yada, 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 right? So really giving it a prompt with just more instructions, more details, more context, right? And you can see in this case, let me actually move my Zoom window. Cool. You can see in this case, it tries to follow these steps, and it, at the very minimum, it does recognize that, hey, there's an error here. The reversed word does not match, right? So they must say error. And so you can see with some prompt engineering, we've at least given it some guardrails, right? We've at least helped it understand a little bit more. It's at least kind of checking its work and not giving us a wrong answer, right? It's at least saying error. But for us, we definitely want to get the correct answer. This is nice because now it's not giving us like badly hallucinating answers, but it's definitely not giving us a correct answer. And so the real question is like, how do we get the correct answer? We spent a lot of time digging through a lot of research papers. I would highly recommend, if anyone's interested in like the state-of-the-art AI research, read this paper on chain of thought. And, at a very high level, it's really teaching the bot how to think. This is actually like a very simple concept, but it's like pretty revolutionary in the world of AI and LLMs here. And I'll give you a really good example of what chain of thought means. So again, we're using this reverse the word example, very clearly reverse the word Freebird. It can't do that, right? It, puts two B's in there for whatever reason, right? And so with chain of thought, what you do is you kind of give it instructions, you kind of give it examples, you kind of walk it through like it's a second grader. You're kind of teaching a second grader how to reverse the word, right? So in this case, I'm like, hey, here's an example. I reverse the word pool, and this is the answer of how to reverse the word. So the reversed word is loop. You take the last letter, you make it the first letter, yada, 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 and so on. So really giving it an example, giving it instructions of how to do that, so that when I try it again, reverse the word Freebird, it can actually do that, right? So now it reversed the word properly, and it gives us Freebird. And I highly recommend everyone try this with ChatGPT. You can do this yourself, but it's a very basic concept, but it's pretty powerful in that you're kind of like teaching the AI how to think, right? And it's also kind of scary because like now we're kind of teaching AI how to reverse words. Like, what are we going to teach them next? And so it's kind of scary, but again, super powerful. And this is obviously just a very basic way to use chain of thought. We use chain of thought in very advanced ways at Spryngtime, but I think this gives you a good visualization of how the AI does not necessarily know how to reverse a word. We kind of give it very basic instructions, and now it can kind of properly understand how to reverse that word, right? And now, it does actually give us a correct answer here. Cool. Any major questions? I'll pause there just in case. Cool. I don't see anything in the chat, so I assume there's no major questions. Cool. So that's kind of chain of thought. Again, we use that at Spryngtime, and that dramatically reduces a lot of hallucinations. Oh, and it also helps build confidence, right? So it helps the bots understand how to answer questions, and it makes them more confident in being able to answer, especially in being able to give accurate answers. And one secret sauce here is this works really well if you have previous questions, so previous customer support conversations. For example, if someone asks like, how do I do XYZ? And it's not in your docs, our bot can ingest previous conversations and really use chain of thought to like properly answer a lot of those questions. So this is super powerful if you have a lot of previous, customer support tickets that, cover a broad range of things. Mia, is chain of thought your sole method to address hallucinations? So no, we have a lot more ways to address hallucinations. This is not the sole way, but we have found this to be super powerful. I'm not going to go into like all the ways that we address hallucination, because that would be like a lot. And also like, candidly, that's some of our secret sauce too. We have a lot of, we spend a lot of time with our engineers building a lot of this. So this is not the only way. I'll actually share another way right after this. This is not the only way. Chain of thought is just one super powerful way that we've seen. Ankit asked, is chain of thought equal to prompt engineering / tuning? Not really. So, I mean, yes, I would kind of equate it to prompt engineering. I would kind of say prompt engineering is like giving it guardrails, giving it detailed instructions. I would say chain of thought is more like, again, teaching it or giving it an example. So it's kind of like a form of prompt engineering. And I think those lines are kind of blurred there, but it's definitely not fine tuning. I can talk more later about fine tuning, but fine tuning is kind of like this whole very advanced machine learning thing where you need a lot of examples. It's kind of expensive, but it can be very powerful. That is a lot more technical, and chain of thought is a little bit more on the prompt engineering side of things. Cool. Awesome. Cool. Again, if you guys have questions, keep them coming. Otherwise, I can move on. So one of the other techniques that we use to answer your question, this is another technique, Mia, that we use is prompt chaining. And at a very high level, it's kind of like putting together multiple prompts so you can feed the answer of one prompt into a second prompt, right? So, that hopefully gives you kind of like a visualization of like chaining a bunch of things together. And so this is, again, a very good example. So reverse the word lollipop, it'll give us an answer. And then, then I ask it in a second prompt. Again, I feed the answer of p lol, whatever it thinks the reverse word is, p lol. I'll feed that answer into a second prompt, right? So I'm like, answer only yes or no. Is p lol the reverse of the word lollipop? And it'll say no, right? So this is a good way of double checking our answers. Again, this not only helps us increase confidence, helps us, check accuracy, but it also helps us, check hallucinations, right? And so very clearly in this example, we would not have answered, let's assume a customer support request is like, help me reverse the word lollipop. We would not have responded to the customer in this case. We have some advanced stuff where we then go retry trying to answer the question. But this is a very simple, very basic example of how to use prompt chaining to feed the answer of one prompt into the second prompt. I saw a question come in. Try changing temperature settings in ChatGPT to get precise answers. So yeah, good question, Anand. So for some context for some people, this is now kind of getting technical. But so temperature in OpenAI or LLMs is just a way to play around with like how creative it is, right? So if you set the temperature pretty high, it'll like start to be very creative, potentially give you like some interesting answers. It's great for like, if you're like, hey, help me write a song or help me write a poem. For us and for customer support, we generally find that basically setting a temperature of 0, like you want it to get very precise. You don't want it to make up stuff. Generally for like what I would call these knowledge use cases, I would almost always set the temperature to 0. because you don't want ChatGPT to get creative. You don't want it to hallucinate. You want it to be very precise. You want it to be, use just the information that it gets and nothing more. So yeah, generally temperature, I think for us, we have it set 0 everywhere. So it's basically not creative. Cool. Yeah, good question. Let me know if there's any other questions. Cool. And then kind of, I mentioned we would touch on tasks a little bit. So again, tasks, we really see it as like ChatGPT on steroids. Again, we started off with knowledge questions. That was great. How do I do this? Can your product do that? But, like there's a whole set of customer support questions, which is like, can you help me do this? Or can you help me look into something wrong with my account? Right. And so, at a high level, tasks are a way to call an API, call a service like Shopify, call a database to get, retrieve, or update information, right? So you can imagine, there's a lot of answers that are not explicit in the help docs, or there is customer contextual answers that are obviously not in the help docs. And so with tasks, we can do a lot of that. We can go grab information, we can go update information on behalf of the customer. So a very common example is e-commerce, where's my order? And again, what we do is we will create a task to go get shipping details from Shopify, and then create a task to get tracking info from FedEx and be able to respond, hey, based off of this tracking, information, your order will arrive in 2 days or whatever, right? Or sorry, it's been delayed because of a UPS issue. It'll be arriving, 1 day later, right? Cool. I saw a question come in. I can see the prompt chaining verification method working for more narrow tasks, but if it's more open-ended, do you have methods of using the same method to verify? Good question. So we actually use prompt chaining. So again, let's go back a little bit. Sorry, I missed that question. So this question is about prompt chaining for narrow tasks like verification, but if it's more open-ended. So yes, we use prompt chaining in actually a lot of places, not just for verifying this question. Without revealing too much, right? A good example of prompt chaining that we even use is like, hey, should we like hand off this question, right? Before even trying to answer. So a good example is we work with a lot of companies, even enterprise companies, and they're like, hey, we actually, if someone mentions, I want to cancel, do not try to answer. Like the answer is very obvious from the help docs of how to cancel. You click these buttons, but we actually want you to pass it off to their customer success manager, because you can give them instructions, but we actually want to talk with them. We want to understand what their problems are, try to convince them not to cancel, maybe give them like a free month trial, right? And so that's a good example of like, before we even try to answer the question, we'll have like an initial prompt that's like, hey, like, what should we do? Should we try to answer? Should we try to hand off to a customer success manager? Should we do something else, right? And so that's a good example of, again, where we use prompt chaining for a very open-ended task of like, essentially, what should we do, right? Should we answer? Should we hand off? Should we do something else? And so I think that's a good example. I don't have this in the document or in the slides about how we use that, but that's a more, let's call it complex, open-ended way that we use prompt chaining. Hopefully that answers your question, Timothy, but yeah, obviously, I'm not going to share all of our secret sauce there. Cool. If there's any other questions, definitely let me know. Cool. So going back to tasks. So again, tasks are like, where's my order? Common knowledge questions, and your help docs cannot answer customer specific questions, and that's where tasks come in. Again, a good example is where's my order, or even like with, what some of the things that we've seen, like help me add someone to my Shopify team, right? How do I do that, right? And so sometimes we can even go update information for them. And so, we can integrate with a lot of services like databases, Shopify, UPS, we actually don't have Salesforce, but we will be coming out. We are actually working on a Salesforce integration right now. So we can talk to any sort of API or service there. And so someone kind of asked about the tech stack. So at a high level, kind of what we do is, or I'll talk about this first, and then I'll talk about our tech stack. So what we've really realized is ChatGPT is really good and really magical at extracting structured data from unstructured text. And so kind of what does that mean? That's a very fancy way of saying, like, you'll have a conversation with somebody about like, hey, like, again, where's my order? I can look into it. What's your order number, right? And somewhat like a customer responds, my order number is 123. And, again, in this example, let's say there's again, this is more techie, but maybe there's a way to talk to Shopify to retrieve order information, and you need to give it an order number, right? So what we've actually found is at a very high level, if we just dump this conversation into ChatGPT and we say, hey, like, extract out the order number and extract out anything you need to call this Shopify function, it can just do that magically, right? Again, it's like kind of like smart at that. It'll just be able to extract, hey, the order number is 123. We'll plug that into this Shopify function to retrieve the order information. And it can just do that automatically, right? It's very smart at that. It's very good at that. And so that's like really the secret sauce is it can take these very unstructured conversations, this conversation history, and then turn it into something that is usable, right? Turn it into a function call that we can then use to then talk to Shopify, get some orders. And then again, we can plug that response, that very techie, very developer focused response and from Shopify, plug that into ChatGPT and have it be able to respond to the customer, right? And so to answer someone's previous question about their the tech stack, so it's very basic. We were before OpenAI released their function calling, so we actually just essentially built our own. But at a very high level, we just use Python, which is kind of what most of our code base is built in. We use OpenAI, and we do a lot of prompt engineering. To be fair, tasks is something that we actually work with each company on a white glove basis with, because we need information about like, when should we do this task? What information do we need for this task? We actually ask a lot of these customer support managers to really help us and help train the bot on when to use tasks or what tasks to use for the different customer support questions, right? So that part is not automated yet. That part is kind of hard to automate. It's like kind of like teaching a bot when to use tasks, things like that. But yeah, at our high level, our tech stack is pretty basic. It's a lot of Python, a lot of OpenAI. Something that we're actually experimenting with right now is using ChatGPT and another like code writer to like help us write a bunch of integrations. So, let's just, for example, we don't integrate with Square today, right? Imagine a customer today, like, hey, we want to use, we want you to solve where's my order, but we want to use Square. Cool. We can maybe have some AI code write that Square integration for us. So that's something that we're playing around, experimenting with. But yeah, at a high level, our tech stack is pretty basic, and a lot of the secret sauce is using OpenAI, fine-tuning OpenAI, teaching OpenAI, prompt engineering with OpenAI to get the right function calls. And we do actually do like prompt chaining with like function chaining, if that makes sense. So we'll have a bunch of prompt chains, and then we'll chain together some function calls, and then we'll plug that into more prompt chaining. But yeah, in terms of just technology, it's purely just Python and OpenAI. Cool. I see some questions. Do you have any thoughts on LangChain or similar frameworks for implementing prompt chaining? So for those of you who aren't super technical, there's a framework out there called LangChain, which is essentially just, again, this is more for developers, but it's a way to do prompt chaining. It's a way to manage your prompt chains. We actually tried out LangChain, and we actually found that it wasn't flexible enough for us. It's a great product. Would recommend that all the developers here who are interested in prompt chaining, check it out. We just found that it wasn't super flexible for us. And so we actually just built prompt chaining, our own prompt chaining infrastructure in-house. Obviously, it's missing some cool features that LangChain has, but we found that it was just easier and faster and more flexible if we built our own prompt chaining stuff in-house. So good question there. Cool. Any other questions? This is great, by the way. Cool. And then bonus, ChatGPT is just really delightful, right? It's basically like if you had a customer service rep who always has a smile on their face and never gets tired, right? And it's kind of dystopian, but like you get my point. It's like a customer service rep who always has a smile on their face. So this is a good example. We work with a company who sells sports products, right? And they actually messaged us like, this is a phenomenal interaction, right? Our bot even wished the user good luck at Nationals. So this is a customer asking about, the product features because they are going to a tournament this weekend, right? And so this is like, a CS leader kind of like praising the bot, right? And so this is the actual response from the bot, right? The customer asked actually 5 questions, and our bot was able to, in a structured format, answer all 5 questions. And it even said, good luck at the, ECNL Nationals, right? This is 100% generated by Spryngtime. This is actually like one of our customers just like loved this, called it out, and they were like, hey, this is amazing. And this is even a response from the customer. So we call our bot Craig for this specific, the company's called Trace. You guys can look them up. They said, wow, like you guys were fast with that reply. They're tempted to call the Guinness Book of World Records. But you can see like our bot almost seems like a human, but it seems like a very like personable customer support agent, right? It's not just like, here's the information, bye, right? It's a lot of like, good luck at Nationals, here's some information, right? So not only does our bot, obviously reply really fast, which customers love, like being able to get a response really quickly is amazing. Not only does it give, correct information, and it was actually able to answer all of their product feature questions, teach them how to do things, right? But it's also like just very delightful. It was like a good interaction. It wasn't just like a sad, upset, or, kind of some like a customer service rep who just like kind of wants to get done with their day. We've kind of, made our bot a little bit delightful. And just to be clear, we have never told our bot, hey, wish customers good luck, or hey, wish them good luck at, sporting events or at Nationals. We have never told our bot to do that. All we've done is just say, hey, you're a, delightful customer service rep, go make sure that customers are delighted, right? And our bot can just, understand and know how to do that type of stuff. I see a question there. OpenAI versus Anthropic versus open source. So I'll touch on that in a bit. Maybe I'll do that at the end. But yeah, so this is a good example of being able to delight customers, right? So we've actually taught our bot how to talk in pirate, so it can, say like pirate things, so it can answer it with like "R matey," things like that. So far, no company has wanted to use our pirate bot. But if anyone out there is interested in customer support and wants to respond in a pirate tone, definitely let us know. We have a bot trained for that. Cool. Do end users know it is an AI chatbot, or are you blurring the line? I'll answer that in a bit also. Cool. But yeah, so that's kind of like how our bot is being delightful. So I'll now answer some questions. Again, if you guys are interested, feel free to email me any, if you're interested in customer support, customer success. We're actually moving now into like customer success and even sales. So we're working with some of our early customers to answer just like, for example, a customer would ask, hey, I want to buy your product, but I don't know if it does X, Y, Z, right? And it's not a use case that's like very explicit. That's a good example of where our, what we call sales education bot can kind of step in, handle that, and then also pass it to the right, salesperson. So it's really automating some of these like low level, what we call tier 1 types of customer success or sales types of questions. So if you guys are interested, feel free to email me. I'm also happy to answer any technical questions that you might have. So feel free to email me technical questions. Obviously I won't share our secret sauce, but feel free to ask. We've had a lot of experience with AI LLMs. Cool. So I got 3 questions. Let me answer them. So one person asked about OpenAI versus Anthropic versus open source. This is in the context of like, for us, in the back end, we're using OpenAI to power a lot of our, responses, a lot of our AI. It's the same type of AI that powers ChatGPT. And Anthropic is just kind of like a competitor. So we've never actually used any open source ones because legally you can't, because they're released under specific open source licenses. So we never actually tried for that, just because we're a company and we want to make money and we don't want to be beholden to some, llama licenses. So we've never actually tested open source. I've heard it can be decent. We have tested Anthropic, and the TLDR is Anthropic hallucinates a lot. Like it's really good. It's really fast. It has a huge context window, so you can like literally, it'll understand everything about your product. That's what it's good for, but it's really bad at not hallucinating. And so we just never spent the time. I'm sure we could probably get Anthropic to be good at not hallucinating, but we have just decided to use OpenAI. We just decided to use OpenAI instead of Anthropic just because we did a production trial and it just hallucinated a bunch. And like, again, we didn't want to deal with hallucinations. Cool. So Anand asked, do end users know that it is an AI chatbot, or are you blurring the line between human and AI chatbot? That's a really good question. So for us, we actually are experimenting and blurring the line with human and AI chatbot. We have some companies who are just like, make sure you respond as a bot, or they'll put something on their website about, hey, this is a bot responding for now. Some companies like that you just saw the example that it was delightful. They're like, just go all in, just pretend like it's a human. We feel like we want our bot to respond more human-like, just because it feels like a good experience. We've actually even done some things to make it feel more human-like. So a good example is like, we've made our bot a little bit slow on purpose, right? So you'll find that a lot of bots out there will respond within like 2 seconds, right? And then humans just very clearly know that it's a bot. And what we found is they're just like, connect me to a human, right? It's kind of like, if you're on the phone with a customer service rep and you're going through all these like menus, you just want to click like 0, you just want to get to a person. So we found that, if we respond really quickly, as an example, people will know that it's a chat bot and they're like, I don't even want to deal with this. I just want to deal with a human. And so we found that like, we've delayed our responses by like 5-10 seconds. It's kind of like, if you pretend like a human is typing on the other end, right? And we found that that people are less likely to want to immediately go to a human, and they kind of even think that it is a human, right? And so sometimes we can't always help them. We'll actually hand them off to a human, but we've found that blurring the line does give at least a psychological difference to a lot of these customers, right? So we are actually of the opinion that we want to see more human-like and pretend like we're more human-like than not. But good question. How do you prevent users from accessing data from other users? So that's a really good question. That is a really good question. And so I think this is in the context of kind of like tasks. So, let's say I'm a bad actor and I want to, get Bob at Gmail's order information for whatever reason, right? So there are actually ways to get around this at a high level. We, depending on the type of company, like for example, I can't share who yet, but we're working with like a financial compliance, we're working with a fintech company, and they have like some compliance stuff. And for them, we're just going to be like, we won't even do like writing updates. We can do reads, but writes seem a little bit too high risk for now. So we can just read customer information. But like, for example, if someone wanted to change their billing address, we're not going to help you with that right now, right? We're just going to be able to do read information. The second big thing that we do is we do a lot of authentication. So a good example is, I forgot what Intercom calls it, but they do something called like identity verification. We do something similar. So we'll work with you guys, especially if, there is sensitive information. But, without that, I could be like, hey, I am bob@gmail.com, give me bob@gmail.com's order information. That would be like a privacy concern, right? So we work with a lot of companies to like either scope what our bot can actually do in terms of tasks. Maybe it can't write any information, it can only read, things like that. And then we do a lot of authentication. And we do push the authentication onto the business that we're working with, but we'll also make sure that the authentication is passed through to our service. But yeah, that's a really big deal. Another big thing that I haven't touched on is like prompt injection, doing exploits, things like that. We've actually spent a lot of time trying to prevent prompt injection. Another good example is SQL injection. So we can talk to databases. It's very easy today without the right guardrails in place to be like, hey, I know this prompt does a SQL query. You say, hey, my email is SQL injection query, right? And so that's another good example of we built a lot of stuff to prevent that. But yeah, it's very top of mind for us. How do we prevent users from accessing data from other users? It's very important. We spend a lot of time working with companies on their authentication and like what levels of access Spryngtime has. Happy to touch more on that on like a more customer or use case specific context. Cool. What is your, actually, just give me 1 second. So someone asked, what is your thought process for fine tuning versus just going with a publicly available LLM? So that's a good question. Fine tuning is generally expensive. Generally, you need a lot of data. For us, we actually steer away towards fine tuning in general. And here's a good example, right? Let's assume we're working with Nike, and then let's assume we're working with Adidas. We would actually probably need to fine tune 2 separate models for Nike because they would just respond with Nike specific information, right? And we would need to fine tune a specific model for Adidas, right? And so, for each customer, we'd essentially need to fine tune. So for our use case, it doesn't make much sense. Generally, I would say if you have a lot of data and you have a lot of money, and you have a lot of patience, then you should fine tune. Otherwise, you could just, use prompt engineering, things like that. Cool. Any positives of Anthropic over OpenAI? Yeah, so it's much faster, a little bit cheaper, and it can fit a lot of context. So for example, I put in my whole like apartment lease and I was like, yo, which is like, I don't know, like 50 pages or something. I don't remember how much, but I was like, Anthropic, like, give me some, what are some weird things about this apartment lease or things that are non-standard, right? And it can just understand this whole apartment lease. So it's really good for being fast, slightly cheaper. I think it's like 10% cheaper, and you can fit a lot more context in there. With OpenAI, you can only fit maybe like 2 pages or 3 pages of that. Cool. Question about the product. Do your customers have restrictions around you collecting their data around support? Do you have mechanisms to make your customers' data available for them to export? It's a good question. Some customers have restrictions around like, we'll have like an MSA agreement or something that, hey, like we'll only like, log information for 30 days and it's only for debugging purposes, yada, yada, yada. No company has had restrictions for us. We have had actually, we've been in conversation with like some healthcare companies, again, some fintech companies who have some more compliance restrictions. Just to be clear, we're not HIPAA regulated or anything yet, so we don't work with those healthcare companies, but I could imagine they might have more strict restrictions and maybe we need to sign another type of BAA type of agreement. But I would say we haven't worked yet specifically with healthcare companies, and then fintech, we do have some restrictions, but that's usually solvable. Do you have mechanisms to make your customers' data available for them to export? Not 100% sure what that question is, but something that we do is for, and I don't know if you mean customer by like the end user who's like Bob, who's asking for support, or like a customer in the sense of like a business. But something that we do for businesses is we'll help them create like dashboards. Right now we just use like Retool. We'll give them some like high level analytics about like the types of questions that they get. Again, we'll help them classify this. We don't have like a full like product out there yet. Again, everything is like kind of like hacked together on Retool and dashboards, but we do have a way where like a business can get some analytics, some insight into the types of questions they're getting asked, responses to them. So I don't know if that answered your question, Timothy, but happy to go in deeper there. Great session. Thank you. Thanks for the session, yada, yada, yada. Cool. Thank you. Are you using OpenAI's function calls? So we're actually in the process. So for a little bit of context, OpenAI for tasks, OpenAI created this like new, let's call it standard, where you can give it a function and it can help you call those functions, right? And so that's really important for tasks. OpenAI's function calls are great. I would highly recommend using ChatGPT or GPT-4. GPT-3 sucks. We've created, again, some of our own stuff. Again, we had this feature before function calls was released. So we're in the process of kind of like evaluating, seeing if we should migrate. But so far what we've seen is like, it's good. We'll probably build on function calls in like, from now until the future. Unclear if we're going to switch everything over. But it's essentially not super hard to have rebuilt that from scratch, which is basically what we did. So I think it's good. We're not using it. Maybe we're using it in one place in production. I'm not 100% sure. We generally have built our own infra again for that. We'll probably use it moving forward because it seems like it's pretty good. Cool. Any other questions? We're like actually exactly at time. We have like 40 seconds left. Any other questions? Awesome. Cool. I'll send out this recording. I'll also, I said I would pick one person to win some ChatGPT, a free month of ChatGPT. I'll figure that out and I'll send that out with the email. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful for both, the customer support people in this webinar and also the devs, the technical people. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to email me if you have any more questions, but otherwise, it was great chatting with you all. Cool. See you and have a great Thursday. Let me stop the recording.